King David is old and sick, and eventually his youngest son will take over the throne. Welcome to Leah's Bible Babble, and today is about King Salomo and what he's most known for, the temple in Jerusalem. The first Chronicle of Kings starts with a little disturbing, so I'll make it short, but it will be important later on. King David is old and sick, and he gets his advice from his advisors that he could be well again if he lays with an untouched girl, aka a virgin. They found such a girl, and she was given the responsibility to take care of David. But even as he had his history with ladies, he didn't get to bed with her. Well, kudos to him. But here is the thought of a virgin as a cure or treatment is born, or at least written down. And this thought and practice will be even more important later on when it comes to the mother of Jesus. King David's sons is on the brink of starting a civil war among themselves when it's time to have the new king on the throne. Salomo is David's youngest son, and also the one most suited for the task. After David's death, Solomon makes it a clean house and gets rid of all his opponents, aka some of his older brothers. With Salomo, we can see a slight change in his reign, with more political strategies than before. One example is that he marries the daughter of a pharaoh in Egypt. The Bible doesn't say which pharaoh it is, but the marriage creates an alliance between the two kingdoms. So I can imagine there has been some kind of cultural clash between the two. One culture comes from a religion with multiple gods, and the other from a monolithic or just one god. Salomo brings his bride to Zion instead of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem lacked a city wall and a temple. His kingdom would be stretched from Euphrates in the east to Gaza in the west, and it stands out that it was peace in the kingdom. When peace is in its place, other things can thrive, like architecture, art, agriculture, and so on. Chapter 5 gives us an unique insight into what it took to build the place that later on will have the name of Temple of Jerusalem. Salomo makes alliances and connection with the countries around him. And one is that he needed cedar trees for the roof, and the best ones grew in Lebanon. And the ruler of Lebanon got wheat and olive oil. Salomo had a workforce that only can be compared to the workforces the pharaohs of Egypt had when they built the pyramids, or in the tomb of the Valley of the Kings. But this time it was not a room, a tomb. It was to be built a temple for worship. He introduced work of force, aka it was mandatory to show up and do what you've been told. And one example is that they can work for 1 month and was home for 2 months. And that Lebanon workforce was over 30,000 men. Other than that, he had 70,000 carriers, 80,000 masons, and 3,300 foremen. And he needed it because the temple he was about to build would be massive and would be taken 7 years to build. And to maintain a workforce like that requires other things in the society to be in its place, like an overproduction in agriculture for food supply, some sort of healthcare system, monetary economy for salaries, which means a tax system need to be in place to get money into the state. And there are everything that comes with the workers' families, somewhere to live, even jobs for the women, because in this massive project, I am convinced that the woman in the family was just as important when she makes the bread in the morning as the mason in the quarry. The entire chapter 6 is like a blueprint in words and gives us an indication of how big the temple was. For example, it was 30 meters long, or 98 feet, 10 meters wide, and 15 meters high. And it was accomplished with few people that had never seen at a time. The stone that was the foundation of the construction, and everything would be covered in cedar trees. The text then talks about everything got covered in gold, but I can buy that the altars and most important parts of the temple had gold on them, but not the whole thing. What do you believe? Tell me in the comments. And also the work for excavating the gold, to mine, transport and smith it, would have been ridiculous. Anyway, remember these achievements took place during the Iron Age, and they had the toolbox of the Iron Age too. In Europe, the dominant culture was the Hallstatt culture, known for the high skills of farming and smithing, and in a couple of decades it will be divided into different cultures, like the Celts, the Etruscans, or modern-day Italy, Greeks, and in the north, the Vikings. This melting pot of culture had in some form connections with the Mediterranean and the Middle Sea. But what was the reason for building the temple? Well, it was almost obvious, for the Lord, of course. But in reality, it was having a better place to store the covenant of the ark. And David has only had a tent that will be described as the tent of the Lord, while Salomon, he made a place in stone and wood. And in chapter 8, lines 1 to 13, gives us an insight of how it went. And in line 5 it is written, "Then the king and his kingship stood in front of the ark and sacrificed sheep and bulls in such a manner that it could not be counted." The rest of the book of Kings, of the first book of Kings, is all about Solomon's different accomplishments, both private and public. If you ever had a hard time of time to sleep, I warmly and strongly recommend chapter 11 and onward. I found them beyond boring reading, or even remember what it was about. Eventually, Salomon dies after 40 years of ruling, and he is buried in his father's city, aka Zion. And his son Rehoboam took over, and the kingdom of Israel would be divided into two once more. So this is the story of King Salomo and his temple. Remember to like and comment and subscribe to my channel, of course. I have plenty of videos to share with you. And of course, the most important thing to remember when you're in here in this community: love and light to you all.